Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Roar Lions Roar. I'm your host tonight, Matt Filipovitz, and I am joined by my nomadic, we'll call it for the moment, co-host Bill DeFilippo. Bill, hello, how are you?
I'm doing okay, Matt. Yeah, I'm exploring lovely Columbus, Ohio, and by that I mean I'm in a house somewhere in Columbus watching a pair of dogs for the next week. So a lot of time to sit around and ruminate over Nittany Lion football.
And what better time of year to do it? So if you have not gone back, we have a entire week's back catalog of offensive podcasts. You can find that both on YouTube and on your podcast platform of choice. And so far this week, we have done defensive line, linebackers. We did cornerbacks yesterday on Wednesday. And today we're doing Penn State's safety room. I think, Bill, this was the most fun room to watch last year just because it was a good mix of young players and savvy veterans who got to go out on top, especially Jair Brown. So recapping the stats from last year, Jair Brown, 74 tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, and 4 sacks. Jalen Reed with 31 tackles and 2 tackles for loss. Zakee Wheatley with 27 tackles and 2 interceptions. Keaton Ellis, 24 tackles and 2 tackles for loss. And KJ Winston with 16 tackles and 1 tackle for loss. A little bit of Mekhi Flowers in there as well, but those were the big ones who went out there and performed. And Bill, let's just dive right in. What did you think about Penn State's 2022 safety room?
It's interesting because I think the thing that made them so good last year was that they had a guy in Jair Brown, who was, yes, a culture setter, obviously. Yes, by all accounts, if not the loudest voice on the defense, one of the loudest voices on the defense, a very smart, instinctive player. And they had a guy like him who was capable of shouldering a gigantic load throughout Penn State's defense. Right? When he's lining up back, kind of playing center field, when he's basically an edge rusher, when he's trying to, coming up in the box and trying to stuff an opposing team's running. Well, he did a little bit of everything. And having a guy who you can trust to do a little bit of everything makes it a little easier to say, okay, Jalen Reed, you are new to playing this much football. You just do what you know. Zakee Wheatley, you just do what you know. Keaton Ellis, KJ Winston, those sorts of guys never had to worry about having too terribly much on their plate because they had a guy in Jair Brown who took care of most of that stuff. And I think we saw throughout the year, Penn State's linebackers were good, talented. Penn State's defensive line, good, talented. Cornerbacks, quite good and very talented. But I thought from start to finish, the most consistently excellent room that Penn State had on the defensive side of the football, Matt, was its safety room.
And it's crazy because if you think about this time last year, where it was all about replacing Jaquan Brisker, who I know, Bill, he's a beloved Chicago Bear for me, but you are also a really big Brisker guy, especially after that 2021 campaign. I think 2020 was kind of a rough go for a variety of reasons. But
yeah,
we won't get into that. But regardless, I think everybody in that room, especially those top 4 guys, answered the bell. And I'm really glad you made the point about all the different roles Jair Brown filled. Like, if you remember in the Michigan game, one of the only enjoyable plays of that game was Brown, hand in the dirt, going up against an offensive lineman. He goes out there and he beats his man. He gets a tackle for loss. Brown went out there and he was a consistent force, not only as a ball hawk. I mean, he finished, I think, the last 2 years with, I think it's going to be 10 picks total. But he went out there and he was a menace behind the line of scrimmage. He created chaos. And I think that really spread to the room, especially, how do I want to word this? I guess nobody did what Jair Brown did in that prowler role where he kind of played everywhere. But it was a good mix in that Jalen Reed quickly became a guy who plays kind of like a box safety. If you remember on the Auburn interception, I think the first one of that game, it's Jalen Reed going out there and closing the gap on TJ Finley, forcing him to throw a bad ball, which is then picked by another safety in Zakee Wheatley, who showed off some phenomenal ball skills all year long. There are all these guys that filled that different kind of roles, but I have in my notes here, Bill, this is our time to just kind of fawn over Tig and everything that he did. And I really do think that this Penn State safety room is going to be excellent once again, but Jair Brown, I think more than maybe any other play on this roster, deserves maybe just like 4 minutes of just you and I just talking about what an impactful player he is and that he was. And I'm nervous about how they're going to fill it, but just hats off to that guy. I'm so excited he got his chance to go out there and make an impact with the 49ers early on.
Yeah, he's a guy who he always just kind of carried himself with a confidence, with a sense of belief in himself. You hate saying stuff like this because, could very easily come off the wrong way, but he just played the game the right way. He was always a guy who went out there, gave it his all, always found a way to kind of have his fingerprints over what Penn State's defense was doing. And yeah, when it was him and Jaquan Brisker back there at safety, Penn State had as good of a 1-2 punch at safety as anyone in the country. And then last year, 2 years ago, Brisker was named a third team All Big Ten option. This past season, he was also named a third team All Big Ten option. Penn State had other guys who made a better All Big Ten team. PJ Mustipher was a second, third team guy. Abdul Carter was a second, third team guy. Joey Porter was a first team guy. I thought, even while acknowledging all of that, Jair Brown was the best and most important player on Penn State's defense. I think the way that Manny Diaz especially used him as just doing so many different things. Like there was one play I remember from the Rose Bowl where he was basically coming off the edge and just blows right past, he's lined up off of an offensive tackle's shoulder, just blows right past him, gets the quarterback. I don't think there might have been a turnover somewhere in there, but he was just a guy who knew how to make plays and knew how to say, all right, I'm being put in this position. I am going to make the best of it. I'm going to make something happen based on my being in this position. And, I'm not worried about how Penn State's safety room is going to replace him. I think Penn State's safety room is going to be excellent. Mm-hmm. But I just don't think you can replace a guy like that by plugging in one dude day one and he's immediately going to be able to step in and do everything. Just because, and that has nothing that says nothing of how talented I think anyone in this group is. It's just, I think that guy was that good and that important to Penn State's defense. It's just so hard to replace that.
Yeah, and this feels like a pretty good launching off point. So we'll put the 2022 defense as a whole to bed now officially. And I think there's 4 guys here, Bill, that very clearly are going to be quote-unquote starters. But for the purpose of this exercise, let's say Penn State first snap against West Virginia, their base defense, let's call it, a 4-3-4. Who are the 2 safeties out there to start things off?
I would probably guess Jalen Reed and Keaton Ellis. Reed is the guy that I am most confident is going to get it. You sent over a snap counts from last year, Matt, before we started this, and Reed was second on the defense with 400 among the safeties with 430 snaps. He's the guy who I am kind of dog-earing as the one who I think could end up having a really big season and turn into, Penn State gets an all Big Ten caliber guy at safety. He's probably the one I'd peg for that. And then I'll say Keaton Ellis. I think he's a guy who's been on campus forever. He's been with the program forever. I believe he was one of Penn State's representatives at Media Day. Like he's just a guy who
already named a captain.
Like you put all that stuff together, and I think he is definitely, when you look through the safety room and you look through I think Jalen Reed is going to be one. Zaki Wheatley, the two freshmen, into Takari Nelson and King Mack, Mekhi Flowers, whatever they get out of Tyrese Mills, KJ Winston. I think he is the safest and most consistent and most understanding of Penn State's defense guy of the bunch. So I'd probably give him. I'd probably pencil him in as the second starter here.
Yeah, so you made that point about Reed snap counts. The 430, that's over 200 fewer snaps than Jair Brown played. Like, he played a ton of snaps, but it's a heavy drop-off. And, I think we'll address the four, main guys as being Jalen Reed, Keaton Ellis, Zaki Wheatley, and KJ Winston. I think you can call all those guys starters. But again, for this exercise, everything you said about Reed, I'm kind of going to say about Keaton Ellis. Already named a captain for the defense, for sure, guy who's going to start, no doubt about it. And I think he was in position to make a lot of plays last year. And I was really surprised that he did not come up with a couple more interceptions or make a few more impactful plays. And I do wonder if some of that was just the not feeling fully comfortable in the Diaz defense. And I think a full year in, I think it's his money year. He is using his COVID year, so he's fully out of eligibility. He had that great story at Media Day about how he would trick-or-treat around State College in a Penn State number 2 jersey, and now it's his chance to really become the alpha in that room. And I think Anthony Poindexter is a coach that likes to have an alpha in the room. It's always been there. It was very clearly Jaquan Brisker. It was very clearly Jair Brown. I don't know if Ellis can be as impactful as those guys in that regard, but in terms of just being the leader of that group and being productive, he's a guy I'm really excited to watch, and I think he can very easily, not maybe be as active in as many different ways as Jair Brown was, but in terms of playing center field and get your hand on the football, I think Ellis can play that role as well as anybody on the roster. And then Jalen Reed, hurt in the Rose Bowl, from what we understand, still a little bit banged up with some bumps and bruises. He's a box safety. He is a ball of muscle, physical kind of player, burned his red shirt as a true freshman, one of only 2 guys to do it in 2021. So he's an experienced guy. He's played a lot of football. He's got decent enough ball skills, but I think he is the kind of guy who Manny Diaz is going to go out there and just want to create a lot of chaos with. And that's really valuable, especially because this is going to be a very heavy 5 defensive back defense, even if it's not the base defense, quote unquote. And I'm just excited to see how those 2 guys really step up and adjust the way they play without Jair Brown. And Bill, you know what else I'm excited about this upcoming fall?
Does it involve home field apparel?
It involves our friends at Home Field Apparel, which, if you do not know, is our podcast sponsor. They make some of the coolest collegiate apparel in the marketplace today. They have, not just for Penn State, but for a ton of other schools. They have crew necks, t-shirts, joggers, hoodies, and of course they have, I believe, a 28-piece Penn State collection at this point that Bill and I own more than a few items from. I am so excited for the season to come around because I live in the heart of the Midwest in Chicago. Home Field is a Midwest-based company in wonderful Indianapolis, Indiana. So I usually see a lot of other schools' home field gear when I'm just bopping around on fall Saturdays. And for our listeners, you can join the fun and you can use promo code RLR23 for 15% off your first order at Home Field Apparel. Again, that's RLR23, all caps, all one word. Thank you to Home Field for sponsoring this podcast. And Bill, I think, are you in the same boat as me in that Zaki Wheatley and KJ Winston are going to play pretty equal, if not maybe like 10% fewer snaps than the starters will?
I don't know if I would put a number on it necessarily, because I think the strength of Penn State's safety room is how, you think of the phrase styles make fights, and Penn State's safety room has so many different kinds of physical profiles of dude. Matt, your alarm's going off.
Yeah, thank you.
So many.
I thought I got it in time.
All good. So many different kinds of physical profiles of dude, so many different kinds of skill sets of dude, that would I be stunned if we have a game where, the fact that Zaki Wheatley is so good against the pass and so good, and going up against, say, a team like Maryland that wants to try and throw the football down the field, and he plays a bit more than maybe than KJ Winston, but KJ Winston's a guy who they trust more against a bigger, more physical team because he's, coming in at 6'2", 204 pounds, a little more solidly built. No, I wouldn't be stunned at all by that. I don't want to put a number on it because I think we could be sitting here at the very end of the season looking through the snap counts and seeing every guy is within, 40, 50 some odd snaps of one another. I think that's the strength of this room, the talents that they have in this room among those four guys, let alone among the pieces that provide a bit of depth elsewhere in Penn State safety room.
Yeah, it's great because, again, you have these four, and then you add in Tyrese Mills, who's coming off his red shirt. Whatever you get from him, I think is just going to be plus. Mekhi Flowers, who I think is a good ball player, but it's going to take some time. And then you have the newcomers in King Mack and Dakari Nelson, which we'll hit on in a second. But I want to make sure I give my flowers to Zakee Wheatley and to KJ Winston. Yeah. Wheatley really impressed me. Does he look like Devontae Smith to you with how skinny he looks? That dude looks tall and skinny you have to be a just naturally really talented football player to make those kind of plays and look as thin as you do. And that's no knock on Zakee Wheatley because it hasn't affected him. I think he played plenty physical enough at that size. Like him forcing that fumble against Purdue week 1 was one of the most underrated plays of the year. That's just a great job of getting his hand on the outside ball. And that's exactly what you want to see out of a guy who's known and his knack and clearly his specialty is making these kind of plays. The Central Michigan pick, I think, was a really great play. The Auburn pick was just really great ball skills. I think he's a guy who's really going to see his production shoot through the roof without Jair Brown eating up all those snaps. Is he the kind of guy who's going to put his hand in the dirt? No, that's just not his style of play. But I made the point about Keaton Ellis playing center field as well as anybody. I put Wheatley right up there with him. Just with those natural ball skills, I think he can really be a breakout candidate. I really haven't sat down and thought about who I think is going to lead this team in picks, but history says it's going to be a safety, and I could easily see it being Zakee Wheatley. I just think his ball skills are too good not to, and in a defense that's going to create more chaos, there's a ton of value in that. And KJ Winston is a guy Craig loves. Craig is wildly high on KJ Winston, and I get it.
If you go to DeMatha, Craig is high on you.
That's true. That's also a very good point. If you go to DeMatha, Craig is usually think you're going to be a superstar. Yes. Not that I don't, but the opportunities for Winston, I think, are going to come in year 3. I think Winston's going to be very disruptive. I really like what he gave them on special teams. I think he is maybe the best athlete of this group. It's very clearly he has the chance to be the best overall football player of this group, I think. I think everyone else has very niche skills. KJ Winston can kind of do it all. He's big, he's tall, he's fast, he's strong. I think he probably reps 4th most out of this room, barring injury, just by nature of how everything above him is going to shake out. But that's no knock on the guy. Bill, of those two, who do you think makes a bigger impact between Winston and Wheatley?
I'd probably guess Wheatley just because he's played a bit more football. But the question that is popping into my head as I think look through the safety room, and the thing that I think fascinates me the most is how they handle blowouts, how they handle games where they're going into the locker room at halftime, it's 35-0. They score a touchdown at the beginning of the 4th quarter to make it 31-3, something like that. And a game's
Buckeye fans are booing Ryan Day.
All that stuff. And it fascinates me because this is a room where, a lot of mouths to feed, a lot of guys who are deserving of getting playing time from the rip. You can make the case that in a situation like that, you want Zakee Wheatley and you want KJ Winston getting every single snap because that's the best opportunity for them to continue to grow. But at the same time, we'll get into the younger guys here in a second, but Tyrese Mills, Mekhi Flowers, King Mack, Dakari Nelson. They're all guys who came in as blue chip recruits, seem like guys who can play, who can contribute to Penn State football this year and really contribute to Penn State football beyond it. And I don't know, and this is, I say this in a really good way. I don't know how they're going to handle that, but I'm interested to see how they do, because I think, again, I wouldn't be surprised if, because they don't have a singular guy like Jair Brown, the safety room takes a tiny bit of a step back at its absolute very best. But I think the floor is so high with this group. And I still think the ceiling is going to be considerably high. I think the floor is so high with this group now and in the future that it's just an interesting problem and a good problem that I want to see them have to solve this season.
We'll hit on the freshmen in a second, but let's touch on those two guys. Let's touch on Tyrese Mills and Mekhi Flowers. Tyrese Mills, I'm not expecting much this year, at least. I think JUCO guy who bulked up to linebacker ahead of the season last year and then lost the whole season and now moving back to safety. Like, that's just a lot of change for one body in 1 year. I think he can be a great guy on special teams, and I really hope we do get to see him go out there and make some plays, because he was a good JUCO prospect. And then Mekhi Flowers, I think, can be a special teams ace. Again, just a guy who is always going to take some time. I think he is a phenomenal athlete. I think he's got those great ball skills. He could have easily played receiver at the FBS level. And again, I just think it's going to take a little bit of time, but I think he's a guy who can maximize his opportunities when they get it. Same boat for you there too, Bill?
I mean, the thing with Flowers, I'm looking at On3 right now. He was a consensus 4-star recruit. He was the number 187 guy in the country.
Big time ball player.
Yeah, he was a big time recruit, and I don't know. I think he's the kind of guy who, like you mentioned, they had to figure out, is he going to be a safety? Is he going to be a wide receiver in college? He spent a year getting used to being a college safety, and would I be surprised if he gets on the field in garbage time situations, in situations where they're comfortable rotating and going that deep into the room, and he's impressive and makes a case for himself to play more? No, I wouldn't necessarily do that. I'm high on all of the individual talents in here. And, when we're talking about a guy who, again, was a 4-star recruit, has had a full year plus on campus at this point, like, I'm just not going to rule out much of anything with really, Mills is a bit of a unique situation. JUCO kid, like you mentioned, bulked up to play linebacker, moving back to safety. So maybe it's a little different with him. But Flowers, of those two, like, if he ends up being a guy who they feel comfortable relying on, would I be shocked about that? No, I wouldn't.
I think it's just all the guys above him. Like, again, this is just, the opportunities are just going to be few and far between, but I think he'll maximize those. And other guys I think can really maximize their opportunities are these two freshmen in King Mack and Dakari Nelson. Bill, I'm leaning both of these guys are green lights, just because I think that both of them are such talented football players, and both of them do unique things. King Mack has gotten rave reviews since the second he arrived on campus. Dakari Nelson maybe will grow into a linebacker one day, but that's for a podcast years down the road. Right now, I think a 6'3" guy who looks like Cam Chancellor, I want to see him on the field, whether that's special teams or whether that's in garbage time, or if he works his way up to a bigger role by late October. I think both of these guys are going to play, and I think we're going to hear both of these players we're going to hear their names be said on broadcasts more often than not. I really think both of these guys can make an impact from day one as true freshmen. Yeah,
Mac especially. I mean, it's unclear if he's going to be playing some kind of cornerback role, whether or not he's going to be a safety, whatever.
It's intriguing to me, yeah.
And it's intriguing to me because it tells me that they're struggling to keep him off the field. And
exactly,
they've never been a coaching staff that's been afraid to throw a true freshman into a role early. And I think with a guy like King Mack, the fact that they're talking about him the way that they talk about all the freshmen that have been thrown into roles early is something that's really encouraging. And again, he seems like a guy who they're going to just have to figure out a way to get him on the field. If Dakari Nelson takes a year, even though, like you mentioned, his physical profile listed 6'3" and 217, just not something they have in that room. Like,
Dude,
that's
wild.
fine.
Like, I thought Brisker was a huge safety. Brisker's like, what, 6'1", 6'2"? Like, the fact
Something
that,
like
and that was like as like a fifth-year guy. Like, who knows if Dakari Nelson can still grow when he gets to college. We see it happen all the time. Like, it's wild.
Yeah. And with a guy like Nelson, they don't need anything from him. Any bonus that they get from him is like a godsend. Like, his best football is not going to be played this year. It's going to be played somewhere down the road. But again, like, I'm sitting here, everything I've read about Kigmac going back to when he was in high school in Florida indicates that he's cut from a different cloth, and the way that the way that it seems like they're not going to be able to keep him off the field, whether that's as a safety, as a cornerback, special teams, whatever, I think indicates that.
So, Bill, we'll end this podcast the way we've been ending our last couple of podcasts, with two questions. Number one, who is your breakout player from this group? You can take breakout whatever way you want it. It can be a starter you think is going to become a national name. It can be a guy maybe we're sleeping on further down the depth chart. Who's your breakout pick?
I will say Jalen Reed, because I think Penn State's safety room the last couple of years has had all Big Ten caliber talents. Last year it's Jair Brown. Year before that, it's Jair Brown and it's Jaquan Brisker. 2020, I can't remember if they had anyone. Yeah, Brisker was a third team guy there going back 2019. Did they have anyone there? Doesn't look like it. So last couple of years,
Taylor's year,
like you go back. Garrett Taylor was a nice player in the secondary. Like, they've had, but more recently under Anthony Poindexter, they've had an alpha dog back there, and for how much talent they have, and it seems like they have a universal level of competence in a number of guys, I will say my breakout guy is the guy who I think is most likely to become the alpha dog in that room, and that will be Jalen Reed.
Okay. All right. I like that pick. Reed's maybe the guy I'm most intrigued by, just because I think he's such a unique body type. Also, that quote he had about why he changed to number one, like to honor the way Jaquan Brisker played the game, is really cool. Like, that's sick.
Yeah.
For reference, Jalen Reed will be number one this fall. So get your rosters updated. For me, I was torn here because I really wanted to pick Zakee Wheatley. Like, I really did. I think he's going to have a phenomenal year. But I'm going to go Keaton Ellis, just because a little bit of that is the story of it all. Like, the Pennsylvania native, the Penn State,
the state college native,
the captain who had this breakout year as a true freshman, who then I feel like hit such a high so early on and never was able to build off of it. And now to get this bonus year of eligibility, I really think he is going to maximize that opportunity. I think he's going to be a guy to make a ton of plays, to be just a reliable figure in that secondary. I think if he picks off if he catches two of maybe like the 5 interceptable balls thrown his way last year, we think about him very differently. And I think he's going to make those plays this fall. So put me down for Keaton Ellis as my breakout pick. Again, if you want to call a more or less returning starter a breakout pick, as much as you can. So that's where I'm going to plant my flag there. And Bill, the final question, Penn State's 2023 safety room, better or worse than the 2022 safety room?
I don't think this question is. I don't think it's as black and white of a question as it seems.
I would agree. Like, all right, so take it where you want.
I think on the whole, just because of the sheer number of guys they have, I think it will be like better. I think the fact that they have potentially 6, 7, 8 guys that can roll out there, that part makes it better. But like, do I think that they, for how good I think Jalen Reed's going to be, do I think that holding him to what Jair Brown was able to do back there, what Jaquan Brisker was able to do back there, is necessarily something I will bank on, something I'll guarantee? No, it's something I need to see first. So, like, again, in one way, yes, and another way, no. It's a horrible way to answer that question. It's a horribly fence city way to answer that question. But like, I don't think it's as easy of a question as, you know, Penn State's running back room or Penn State's linebacker room or something like that.
This was the hardest one I've like had to wrestle with in terms of better or worse, because I really like Jair Brown. Like, he was one of my all-time favorite defenders for Penn State. Like, he did everything. It was so cool to watch a JUCO guy. He had such a great story. But I think I'm going to say better. I think because I think the floor is so high. I think there's 4, maybe 5 guys in that room who, if you told me they were starting, I would say great. And I don't know if I can say that about any other position on the team. Like, pure safeties, I think there's 4.5 guys who can go out there and perform and like be honorable mention all Big Ten caliber guys. And that's a luxury we have not had. So big credit to Anthony Poindexter, man. He's built that room up, and just big credit to those guys. I think this is a room that we're going to have a ton of fun watching. I think with the step forward, I think that front 7 is going to take. I think there's going to be a lot of ducks thrown in the middle of the field. And I think these safeties are going to have a field day, and it's going to be a fun year for those guys. And Bill, that's all I got. Any final thoughts here on the safeties or on the defense as a whole? We haven't had you on in a little bit. Anything you want to hit on here before we send the folks off into their Thursday?
No, not really. I mean, I think that Penn State's defense is going to be good. Yeah.
Hot take to Filippo over here.
I do what I can. I want to make sure the people paying subscriptions for our podcast get their money's worth, you know?
That's true. That is true. And again, you can do that by promo code RLR23 at homefieldapparel.com. But Bill,
or you could just give me money if you want that to be your subscription. I will happily accept any Venmoing of money from any of our listeners.
I will be sure to tweet out your Venmo as well as your home address and your phone number along with this podcast tomorrow.
I would prefer if you didn't do 2 of those things.
And the 2 of them are up to you, dear listener. Bill, thank you so much for joining me. To our lovely listeners, if you can, be sure to leave us a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. Be sure to follow us over there on Twitter at RLRblog. We're posting a lot of really fun content. Bill, are we bringing Twitter Spaces back after games this fall? Because those were a lot of fun last year. Or is that a spur-of-the-moment kind of decision?
We'll see how we're feeling after games and make decisions off of that. But my guess is, we will probably do something.
Yeah, those are always a ton of fun. We always get some great engagement there. If you're on YouTube, hey, subscribe to the channel. Leave a like on the video. Hit that subscribe button. Jump in the comments. We've had a lot of fun previewing this defense, and it's been great to see the whole gang kind of get back together. So be sure to follow us over there on YouTube. Again, we're just Roar Lions Roar over there as well. Bill, tomorrow we will be doing the special teams. I'm nervous about this group. But I'm intrigued by a lot of the options, and I'm excited to get talking about that with you here, probably in the next, hour or so. Peek behind the curtain. We're going to record that a little bit later tonight. And thank you so much to our listeners for listening. Be sure to use promo code RLR23 at Home Field Apparel for 15% off your first order. And for my co-host, Bill DeFilippo, I'm Matt Flippovitz. Take care, everyone, and go State.